The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. On the first day of the week, 2 of the disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 11 kilometers from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And Jesus said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" Jesus asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then Jesus said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized Jesus, and he vanished from their sight. The 2 disciples said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. These were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then the 2 disciples told what had happened on the road, and how the Lord had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The Gospel of the Lord. In this famous episode on the road to Emmaus, these 2 disciples are despondent. They're moving away from Jerusalem, the holy city, and they are questioning all that they had experienced. In fact, they were doubting, because when Jesus comes to walk with them and ask them what they were feeling, they answered, "We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel." In other words, they were thinking the Messiah would come to free Israel from their bondage to Rome and make them once again at the height of power. But that was not Jesus' mission at all. So they fundamentally misunderstood Jesus, and they were confused and despondent, walking away from the holy city. What does Jesus do? He says, "How slow of heart you are to believe all that the prophets have declared." So he goes back into the Old Testament, opens up the scriptures, and then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interprets to them the things about himself in all those Old Testament scriptures. In other words, the types go all the way back from Genesis right through to the Old Testament, and we have the type of the just man Abel, perfected in Jesus, who was murdered by his brothers. Isaac, who would have been sacrificed if the angel had not stopped him, now perfected in Christ, who takes the place of Isaac. Jesus is the Passover lamb. He's the just man of the book of wisdom, He's the suffering servant of Isaiah. All these types the prophets had been proclaiming, and now Jesus comes to fulfill in himself. He goes on, though, because as he was about to walk ahead of them past their village, and that's always a sign of a theophany about to come, they urge him to sit at table with them, which he does. And at the table, he reenacts the Last Supper. He takes the bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Those 4 action verbs are the ones that were said at the Last Supper, the ones we hear every Mass, and the Eucharist is being reenacted here, right in this Emmaus account. And their eyes are opened. And they recognize Jesus, and he vanishes from their sight. And they ask the question that all of us should be asking: were not our hearts burning within us? While we're about to receive Christ, our eyes have been opened in baptism, and further every time we come and hear the Scriptures proclaimed. Well, then they get up and they go back to Jerusalem. So there's a good thing. They're going back to the holy city. They find the 11 because they want to share the good news. But the 11 have also encountered the Lord, so they share the good news. So they're both sharing the good news to each other. And it ends, the 2 disciples just told what had happened on the road and how the Lord had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread, i.e., code word for Eucharist. Tremendous passage for us to contemplate. As we come to this Mass, this is the Last Supper represented for us. Christ is here to open our eyes. Let us rejoice. Always draw nearer to the holy city, which is the church, and then be willing to proclaim, always joyfully, the good news of Christ's death and resurrection.